Okay. Uh, Welcome, everyone. This is Marcela Hernandez. I'm the Administrative Director of the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, and this is the webinar for those of you who are um, serving as reviewers for the President's Postdoctoral Scholars Program. Maxine Ignacio is who you've been talking to. She's our program assistant. She's going to help us monitor the chat box and other things. And I am just going to go over the housekeeping items, and then I'm going to turn it over to Noah Weisleiter, who's going to go through the presentation. So number one, a number of reviewers were not able to make the time, so we are recording this webinar so that we can send it to them and they can listen to it and go over the slides. As Maxine said, if you have a microphone that is working, you can use it to ask questions along the way. You might want to also alert us that you have a question by using the icon at the top of the screen that looks like a person with a hand up. That is a way for you to raise your hand and we will know that somebody has a question. So both Maxine and I will be looking at that as the webinar goes on. When you're not talking, it's probably best to mute your microphone so that background noise doesn't come through. And if you don't have a microphone, or if you prefer not to use your microphone, there is a chat box in the lower right-hand corner where you can type any questions that you have. And again, you can also raise your hand so that we know that we need to check the chat box or let you speak. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Noah.
Thank you, Marcella. First, let me, if anyone's having an issue with the levels on my microphone, please raise your hand now or just let me know. I can turn it up a little bit, but hopefully everyone can hear me okay. See no problems. I will continue. So, well, thank you, thank you for being here today, everyone. My name is Noah Weisleiter. I'm the faculty director of the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, and I'm on the faculty in physiology and cell biology in the College of Medicine. And today we'd like to give you an orientation to the Presidential Postdoctoral Scholar Program in general, as well as the specific details about the review process for the PPSP this year. We're really excited to have a great panel this year. We've had a lot of really good wide diversity of expertise and different experiences on the review panel, and it's great to be able to have all of you contributing. This is a really important initiative both from the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs and also from the Office of the President. The President's very excited about this program. He's looking forward to meeting the first cohort that we have on campus now and to the selection of this second cohort of applicants to the program. So today we'll provide you a very brief introduction to the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. I know some of you have not had a lot of interaction with us. I will keep this brief, but I did want to give you an idea about what the OPA is and what our mission is on campus. And then a little bit of detail about PPSP itself. And then we'll go into the nomination process, how we're doing the selection of these candidates, and how those selections will be announced. So that's our agenda. I want to be mindful of everybody's time, so I'm going to move this along at a brisk pace, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. As Marcel mentioned, just put your, just either speak up if you can with a microphone or click on the chat box and raise your hand and we can cover any questions you have there. Happy to have them throughout the presentation. So the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs is about a year old now, a little over a year old, and we have the mission of preparing the next generation of research leaders coming from campus, and we do that by enhancing their experience as postdoctoral scholars across the entirety of the university. We're a university-level office, so we represent all of the university, every discipline is where we find postdocs is welcome to interact and make use of the office that we provide. And we think of postdocs as the next generation of research leaders, particularly in academia, but also beyond academia. And we try to enhance their leadership skills through different types of career development opportunities, and also by generally improving the quality of this training environment that we provide here at Ohio State. Not just for the postdoctoral scholars, but also the faculty mentors like you. And This program is one of the ways that we do that by both supporting postdocs and allowing faculty mentors to effectively recruit top-tier postdocs to their groups on campus. The Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, as I mentioned, is not a college initiative. It's at the level of the university itself. We report directly to the Office of Research and the Graduate School, and that's to reflect the fact that postdocs are essential for many of the research operations on campus. So that's the Office of Research interest, and the fact that the fact that they are still trainees puts them in the purview of the Graduate School, where we can have synergistic efforts as it relates to career development activities. So we report to those. And we also interact with several other groups on campuses very closely, one of those being the Postdoctoral Advisory Council, which is a group of faculty and staff who interact with postdocs as part of their day-to-day work at the university. And that's our advisory council, and that's how we reach out to both the faculty and the staff at OSU. In addition, we interact closely with the Postdoctoral Association. That's a grassroots effort from postdocs on campus. And that's one of the key ways that we interact with postdocs throughout the community and also understand the sort of programming needs that they have. The office itself, we're not the biggest office on campus, but I think we get a lot done. As I mentioned, I'm the faculty director. You already heard from Marcela Hernandez. She's the administrative director. She did her PhD and postdoc here at Ohio State, and then moved on to work with the Life Sciences Network here, and then into College of Arts and Sciences. And we've been lucky to have her working with us since we started the office. Maxine Ignacio, who you heard her voice earlier, and she's taking notes today. She's our program assistant, and she takes care of some of the other programming things that take place out of the office. We also make use of some student assistants as well who help us with various types of activities. And one of the key things that we do on campus is try to keep track of postdoctoral fellows. I'm not going to go into all the demographics here. You can see a lot of that from our website if you're interested in more details. But I just wanted to point out the fact here that most of our postdocs on campus are in a researcher job title. So those are ones who are being supported by university funds or by grants to their mentors, whereas 13% are fellows on campus. So those would be, and 6% fall in a fellowship category, which doesn't necessarily reflect being a fellow. But around between 15 and 20% of our postdocs are on a fellowship. We see this postdoctoral program as an opportunity to increase that number and also to use that to help recruit postdocs to campus. Just some of the demographics here. It shows that we have postdocs across the vast majority of all of our colleges. Obviously, there's a difference in scale in a lot of those different colleges. Depends somewhat on the type of research funding within there. The most common field to see postdoctoral scholars in most universities is in the biomedical sciences, and that's why we have the most in the College of Medicine, also in College of Arts and Sciences. But as you can see from this graphic, almost every college on campus has postdocs in it. So that kind of shows you how the breadth of the program and how it reaches across all the different colleges. And we're happy to have representatives from all those colleges on the review panel this year. This gives you a little more breakdown about who the funding agencies are that support at least most of the postdoctoral scholars on campus. Again, the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health leading that up. It also relevant to this the PPSP as well. We just wanted to point out that the majority of our postdocs come from international sources. That is, that they had their postdoctoral got their degree someplace outside the United States and now come to the United States to do a postdoctoral training experience. So, and you'll see that reflected in some of the applicants to this program as well. We have several coming from overseas too. We also want to talk a little bit about underrepresented minorities. As with many universities, that's an area where we have underrepresented minorities are not well represented in our postdoctoral population. While this is not a program focused exclusively on increasing number of underrepresented minorities on in our postdoctoral community. That's something that runs throughout everything we do as an office, and there'll be a little bit we talk about some of the sort of plans that are available within this application process to help facilitate an understanding of that. And just to kind of give you an idea of what the scope of the situation is, we have about 700 postdocs on campus. That puts us in the upper quartile of the U.S. universities in terms of the number of postdocs. When we look at, and that's actually in the upper tiers of the Big Ten as well. So we have a number of postdocs. A lot of them come from overseas, but we still have a challenge as it relates to underrepresented minorities. So today we're here to discuss the Presidential Postdoctoral Scholars Program. So this is, as I mentioned, an initiative that we began in partnership with the Office of the President and with the Presidents and Postdoctoral Advisory Council. This was initiated a few years ago, and we had our first cohort that was recruited last year with the help of a lot of reviewers, both on the PPAC and also from around the university. We have some repeat people on the panel, but a lot of new ones as well. So I want you, particularly if you're new, to understand that the real objective of this program is to recruit, recognize, and retain the best postdoctoral researchers. And we define that by those who have the potential to really become leaders within their academic disciplines. With the way the program is comprised right now, we're looking for people that we think are going to become faculty members and then develop into leaders in their particular fields, and that will give us and use that as an opportunity to get the top tier talent that we're looking to have as researchers here at Ohio State in as they're developing and putting together their independent research portfolios. So they talk a little bit about the eligibility for the nominee. It's important to remember that a nominee cannot nominate themselves to this program. They have to have a faculty member who is going to sponsor them. That would be the nominator. We'll talk about their necessary credentials in a moment here. So the nominee has to hold a PhD or an appropriate terminal degree. That's important to remember because some disciplines on campus don't have a PhD as a terminal degree in a standard sense. So under those conditions, we've already screened applicants to see if they meet this criteria, if they have a sufficient terminal degree. They have to be sponsored by an Ohio State faculty member who will be their primary mentor.
Yeah.
And the idea here is that they're going to show that, is there a question?
Yeah, from Dr. Cooley. It's she's wondering.
Oh,
if
yes, I see. I'm sorry. Okay. Yes. Yep, I see it. I see it. Yes. So a question from the audience: if we're looking for the best people who will end up staying at Ohio State, it's not necessary that they remain at Ohio State. It is perfectly reasonable that they take a faculty position elsewhere. We don't separate criteria whether they're going to stay at Ohio State. We consider a metric of success if they end up at a top 20 department in their particular discipline, whether that's at Ohio State or somewhere else. So that's a great question. It's not required that they stay at Ohio State. You're welcome. And we want to show that they're demonstrating commitment to doing, to pursuing a career in research and creative expression, and that there's a preference between the candidates who wish to pursue an academic career. We also knew for this year we're putting a limit on when they are able to actually begin their postdoctoral position, no later than January 1st, 2020. We're trying to develop a cohort effect amongst these excellent scholars. We want them to be coming on campus at close to the same time, and so we're putting a limit on how late they can actually begin working at Ohio State. This should give most candidates a sufficient amount of time to be able to come to Ohio State from their current position. It's also required that they complete an individualized development plan, or IDP. We provide resources to these incoming potential nominees to complete that IDP. You will not be receiving the full IDP. Those tend to be much longer, but that's the basis by which you will develop the career development plan. The mentoring plan that's in the actual application packet is designed. We'll talk about that more when we get to that criteria. But you will not receive the full IDP. You'll receive a mentoring plan that contains some of that information. So don't expect that in the application packet. It's also important to remember that this is intended to be a recruiting tool. So we are looking principally to bring scholars who are off campus onto campus. However, we also recognize the fact that several disciplines have fairly rigid calendars when it comes to bringing postdoctoral scholars in. Some disciplines, people come in almost every day. Other disciplines, it only comes in once a year. So in order to reflect that, we allow postdoctoral scholars who have been on campus less than a year to apply for a position in the PPSP. So in this case, we're looking for those that have been hired after November 1st, 2017. That's our cutoff date for that as well. Again, we've screened candidates for this as well, so you don't need to worry too much for that, but we do want you to understand the basic criteria associated with applying to the program. Let's move on to the nominating faculty. So these are the faculty members at Ohio State who are providing who are nominating the nominee to come in and be part of the program. So the nominating faculty has to be a tenure track faculty member. They may only nominate one person per cycle. All these things we've already screened out for. It's also required that they not be the candidate's PhD or other terminal degree advisor, even if it was at a different institution. They'll also be submitting a mentoring plan. As I mentioned earlier, this mentoring plan is based off that IDP that was put together by the candidate. But it's the mentor who puts together the individualized development plan, or the mentoring plan based off of that. And this should be a collaborative effort between both the nominating faculty member and the nominee. We also require that the nominating faculty, should they receive that, will undergo an orientation session to learn more about the program and the review criteria. And if they are a recipient of the PPSP, they participate in future review efforts, at least for a year. We have several people who are doing that online now. Thank you again for following up with that and helping us do the review. And this year, it's good to have expert people who have been through the program before. It's also we also require a certain degree of expertise as it comes to mentoring postdoctoral scholars. Postdocs are not graduate students. They have specialized needs that need to be addressed in a mentoring plan and also in the time that they're here. So we want our postdoctoral scholar mentors to have at least 3 years of prior experience mentoring postdoctoral scholars. If they have less than that, we still will allow applications, but we would want them to show that they have undergone some sort of formal mentoring training, and we provide that from our office, and that they can develop and that they have some sort of co-mentor in their application packet that also has that required experience. So there are cases where there's very little history of postdoctoral training in a particular discipline. We find postdocs in more and more disciplines than there were previously, which is both exciting and also a concern about getting proper mentorship for these postdocs and what a postdoc means in those disciplines. But under those conditions, we have said if they have 10 or more years of experience mentoring a postdoctoral or mentoring a doctoral or Master of Fine Arts students, then that would be equivalent to mentoring postdocs for an extended period. If less than that, then they, again, with formal mentoring training and a co-mentor, we'll certainly allow that as well. So that's just the idea here, is to provide a certain degree of experience with mentoring advanced students. I saw a question just came up here. How is it determined whether postdoctoral training is new in the field? That's a good question. We've kind of done that in a, and then as I mentioned, all this screening's taken place already. And we try to be as liberal as we can with that. The idea is to be as inclusive as possible. The idea here is just if there's a question, we tend to err on the side of the fact that that they haven't had an opportunity to have postdoctoral scholars before. So we would, in those cases, accept that they have experience with the mentoring of doctoral and MFA or MFA students at that point. So in general, that tends to be places that aren't in the STEM fields. I heard somebody making sound. Was there a question?
I just wanted to add that we will, when we send you the instructions for the review process, we'll include a list of disciplines that are generally in this category of not having enough history of postdoctoral training. So mostly there are humanities and some social sciences, but also some engineering fields.
Exactly. Great. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the one other thing I wanted to mention here too is that because of this sort of this connection here, whether there's the amount of mentoring that's been available to these particular nominating faculty members, in some cases when you review an application, you may find that the co-mentor in where there's a list of what the previous mentees of that particular mentor are, you may see the co-mentors list there in the place of the mentor of the actual lead nominating faculty. So just be aware of that so there's not any confusion. There are some cases where you will see the co-mentors mentoring list either by itself or as an addendum to the list that's provided by the nominating faculty member. So just keep that in mind. And just be aware, and just to emphasize too, that it's not necessarily required that they have co-mentors, particularly if they have that amount of experience. So in some cases, there will be no co-mentor. Any more questions on that? There, I see a question being typed. Or maybe it's just ghosting there. Is a co-mentor, so there's a question, is a co-mentor an active research advisor or once a year sort of mentor? So that's actually going to be part of, that's a great question. That'll be part of the mentoring plan. They'll talk about what that co-mentor's role will be, and that's certainly an aspect of the evaluation criteria. If it's a situation where they're only meeting once a year with this co-mentor and that's sufficient in that field, then that's fine. If it's a research field where there's supposed to be a lot of interaction back and forth and that's not being done, then maybe that's a concern for that application. So that sort of topic will be discussed in the mentoring plan. And if it's not, then that's an area of concern and something that you can certainly use as an evaluation criteria. Does that answer your question?
I have something else to add, and that's that the postdocs are not necessarily required to be working on a project that is co-advised by the mentor and the co-mentor. But the important thing is that the co-mentor, because of their experience training postdocs, is involved and can help in areas where the mentor can't because of the lack of experience.
Right. I mean, we would expect, and you may notice as we go through this, the research plan is not a major, it's an important component, but it's not the single most important component of the evaluation that we're doing here. We're giving the opportunity for, the expectation is that somebody who is a tenure track faculty member at Ohio State will be able to come up with a better research plan than we would be able to evaluate effectively when we go across so many disciplines. So when it comes to the evaluation criteria, we're focusing a lot on the mentoring capacity, and that's why, as Marcelo said, we make it distinct, the research aspect versus the mentoring aspect. Great, thank you. So just one last bit before we get into the nomination and evaluating the material. Just the timeline so you're aware of what's the schedule we are on here. Hopefully most of you saw when in August 16th we started to roll out the announcements relating to the general call for nominations. The letters of intent, which were really just the idea of understanding how many applications we could expect, were due on November 1st, and then we just had on December 3rd the nominations being due. So we are putting together as quickly as we can the application packets and screening through everything to make sure that we can get to these to you by December 10th, and then we give you several weeks to be able to go through the nomination review period. And then January 28th, we want to do our first round of award notifications next year, with the intent of having a final announcement of the winners of the program and our new cohort sometime in mid-February. The date's tentative now. It depends on how quickly we can get people to confirm that they'll be part of the program. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we want to start these awards no later than January 1st, 2020. So the nomination process. So let's go into that. So this is sort of the process by which we're running the nomination process. We already talked about the letter of intent, and right now we're in the process of checking the, I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but we're in the process of um, checking the eligibility of all of the applicants. We've already done some of that screening before that with letters of intent. We're making sure that all these are eligible before we get them to you. We certainly are cognizant of your time, and we want to make sure that no one is wasting their time. I see there's a question coming, but I'm going to continue until that comes up. The OPA will, once the letter of intent was checked, then the OPA sends a link to submission portal. We're doing all online submission this year. The question that comes up, if January 2020 is the latest award can begin, what's the earliest it can begin? Actually, as soon as the cohorts, or as soon as we award them, we've had people who have started very shortly thereafter in this first cohort, and that's worked well. So we don't really have a minimal time that it can start. So thank you for that question. The OPA, once the faculty submits the nomination materials, and that comes from the faculty, they assemble the letters, all of the letters as well. They come to the faculty member, not from the applicant. And then the OPA checks and sends these out for review. We're in the process of checking those now. And then the reviewers will submit your scores. We'll talk more about that in a moment here. And then we'll calculate the final score and then rank the applicants based on that numerical score. So what's that in that packet that comes in from the nominating faculty member? A key component of that, as you might imagine, is the nominee's CV. That's where we're going to have a lot of the information that's going to be important for your evaluation process. They'll provide their CV. As we don't provide a lot of requirements on the format of that CV, but obviously we instruct them to focus on their scholarly accomplishments to that point in their career, and that's a big portion of how you're going to be evaluating the characteristics of the nominee themselves. There's also an education and background statement that's written by the nominee. So that's really sort of what you might think of as a personal statement that for those applicants. It's going to have information on their personal background, their career trajectory, what their career goals are, how they expect to use this position to help them move forward as part of their career development. It's also going to talk a little bit of why they want to work with that faculty member at Ohio State. Obviously, that is an important component about how interested they are in the program and how well this mentoring relationship will take place. And then there's also going to be discussion of the broader impact of their proposed activities. We try to match up as much as possible to a discipline that's close to your expertise, but we understand that, that we're not going to have an expert in everything, and we don't have 5 experts in everything on this committee. So the idea would be is that they use this statement also to explain to you the importance of this as the importance of this both in their field and to the general public, and how this will be an impactful bit of scholarly conduct that they're going to do that'll help move them towards an independent position at a top tier program in their particular discipline. Then there's also a diversity statement. I touched on that earlier as well. This is limited to 500 words. But this also points out how they help to bring diversity both to their future research program as well as their teaching efforts in the future as well. This is something that's becoming more and more common in applications for faculty positions. I'm sure some of your departments do a little similar approach. I know ours does as well. And that also will include, in this particular case, how they can help Ohio State as well as the discipline become more diverse and inclusive. The idea here is to reflect the core principle of the university pursuing a diverse student and faculty population here at Ohio State. So that's one of the ways that we're going about doing that in this effort. Any questions on that? Another important aspect of the nomination materials, as you might imagine, is the 3 letters of recommendation that are provided. So these are supposed to speak towards the nominee's potential to be an independent scholar in academia. They'll review the things that you probably would expect, their past job and task performances, how their experience and expertise comes into play here, their general intellectual ability and their accomplishments within the discipline. And also, we asked them to look at different types of personal attributes that pertain to how well they work in a team, their perseverance, their communication skills, and other aspects. And then the other important aspect is the nomination letter from the faculty mentor or sponsor. This is coming from the person at Ohio State who will be sponsoring them and acting as their principal mentor. They are going to talk about how that applicant is going to impact their scholarly program, how they will interact, and how likely it is that this research or scholarship that they're doing is going to have an impact on their discipline. And this will give you a good idea, hopefully, how well this will contribute to them becoming an independent faculty member. Obviously, different disciplines have a different level, different bar for, and different types of scholarly conducts that are necessary to become a independent faculty member. And the nominees, the nomination letter should give you some guidance on how close the people are in their particular discipline to being at that level and how they can get there with the support of this program. There's also going to be a table provided there. I alluded to this earlier because this may be either from the nominating mentor or from a co-mentor or both. Under those conditions, you'll see tables there, and they're going to list the last 10 postdoctoral scholars that were trained, up to 10 postdoctoral scholars that were trained by the nominating faculty member. If the faculty member is not trained postdoctoral scholars, or very few of those, you can look for other places for the evidence that they have some experience with postdoctoral mentoring. We have several different ways that can be done, whether they have formal training, such as those that takes place in the National Research Mentoring Network, if they have a co-mentor with a track record for supporting postdoctoral scholars, and as I mentioned earlier, if there's someone from, in general, a non-STEM discipline, although there's some engineering disciplines that fall into this as well, where there's a little history of postdoctoral training, that table will list their advanced doctoral students and or students with another terminal degree is appropriate for that discipline. So just keep that in mind, that section will probably be the most variable one you'll come across when you look at these different types of nominating packets. And if the co-mentor is needed under these conditions, there'll also be a letter of support provided by the co-mentor, mostly focusing on what their role is going to be in the project. We had that question earlier. Oh, I see there's a question there. Sorry, Elizabeth Hewitt. This is a new feature of the application. Yes, the training track record is a new feature. That was a reflection of feedback we received from the reviewers last year, and that will give you an opportunity to understand how much experience that postdoctoral or the postdoctoral mentor has in mentoring postdocs. That was something that we were hoping would come across in other items, but we added a specific item to allow that to take place. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. For the reviewers who reviewed last year, yes, this is definitely a new part of that. Hopefully that will help in the review process. Oh, so the nomination materials. So also, there's also a mentoring plan provided for the first year. We talked about that mentoring plan being what's developed from the nominee's individual development plan. They set up themselves and share with their potential postdoctoral mentor, and then they work together to include this, to complete this mentoring plan for that first year. As I was asked earlier, the co-mentor role needs to be included in this. It can't just be we have a co-mentor. There needs to be a description about how they will contribute to this program in an effective and thorough way. Also, they're encouraged, if there's going to be informal co-mentors, to include them in that mentoring plan as well. Of course, in order to be successful, you need to have a mentoring network. You need to have a lot of different people that you know and work with. So we're certainly encouraging them to be, when that's the situation, to be pointed out in the mentoring plan as well. Along with that mentoring plan, the nominee will provide up to three examples of their scholarly output. Now, depending on the discipline, that could be 3 short papers, or it could be 3 book chapters, or it could be 3 whole books. It all depends on what is appropriate for that particular discipline. We do not expect you to review every single line of every single scholarly effort that is provided. That was a confusion about the first time, so I want to make the first nomination round. I want to make that very clear. If you have 800 pages of text there, we don't expect you to read all of that. But this again goes back to that idea that you may be reviewing some disciplines that are not in your exact area of expertise, and you may not have a full understanding of what scholarly output looks like in that discipline. This is an effort to allow you to see what that takes place. So that's the idea behind this, is to give you an idea to see what is there. Now, if you have a expertise in that and you want to go through all of it, or if it's something that you can and do have time to evaluate all of that, you are more than welcome to do that. And actually, I read all of them last year, and it was were a lot of interesting stuff in there. And particularly if that's something where you can clarify how important their work is, maybe that's something that can be useful for you, particularly when it's outside your discipline. So that's why we provide that there. The intent isn't for you to necessarily read 800 pages of text. So all of this information will go into a single PDF file that we will provide to you, one for each nominee. We can provide that in different ways if you're having technical issues with that. One of the things that we've learned is that there's always some variation in how PDFs work, and there's sometimes some issues with that. We also have limitations to how we can both collect and provide information, particularly through the American with Disabilities Act. There are certain types of files that we would like to use, but we can't use by university policy. And there may be issues with the review process based on some of that. We've had challenges last year because of that. We've tried to fix some of those, and we'll see how it goes. If you have difficulty with any of the files, do not hesitate to contact us, and we will try to remedy these as well as we can. That's just the challenge that we're going to have to face with the need to be able to remain compliant with ADA and other policies. But all of this will be made available to you through a Buckeye Box folder, which is our secure confidential system, so you can directly download and upload to those without any concerns. So that's how those are the elements of the application packet, and that's how we are going to provide them to you through the Buckeye Box's PDF files. Any questions on any of that at this point? Okay. So we have all the letter of intent that came in. So this year we have 70 potential nominations coming in. 43% of those, or 43 of those from outside of Ohio State, and 27 of those from internal nominations. They break down in a similar ratio to what we saw taking place when we just talked about the number of postdoctoral scholars we have, which makes a lot of sense. But a number of different colleges that are supported or that have applied here. We're excited again to have nominees from throughout the university. It's exciting to be able to have a lot of different disciplines and see a lot of different types of scholarly conduct being part of this program. We did receive a few less actual nominations than we did with letters of intent. You might expect that, but we're still close to that ballpark. It's a pretty diverse group. There's gender. You can see the gender breakdown here. Some of the different types of domestic versus international nominees. Some information on underrepresented minorities, and a breakdown of their postdoctoral experience. We should point out here that we actually limit this to only well, we certainly encourage people with a limited amount of postdoctoral experience here. We're looking for those that aren't necessarily haven't been doing long-term postdocs. There's data that suggests that that's a sort of a contraindication to necessarily moving forward quickly in the into an independent faculty position. So we scale towards those that have less previous experience as postdocs. So that's the demographics of the group that you'll be looking at, as well as what will be in the application packet. I want to talk a little bit about the selection process as well. So with the review panel we have here, each nomination will be reviewed by 5 independent members of the panel. We try to assign the reviewers to related fields as much as possible. I mentioned that, but as you might imagine, these are all people who are looking to be the expert in their particular area of their discipline, and because of that, it would be impossible to have everybody be an expert in that field. We try to at least get it as a related field as we can, but also we do want to have input from a lot of different types of disciplines and how well that you can appreciate the impact of their work, even if you're not in that given discipline. I'm sure many of you have also served on the graduate school fellowship committees where you review outside your discipline. And I hear from people who have served on that as well as some people who served on our committee last year. It's fairly straightforward to see who the elite candidates are, even when they're outside of your discipline. So if this is the first time you're reviewing in this sort of an area where it might be a little out of your discipline, I would encourage you to lean into it and embrace it, because it's actually a good opportunity to see some really interesting scholarly efforts. So, but your discipline specific. Oh, did you want to say something, Marcella?
Yeah, I want to just add one thing is that we will not give you any nomination from your own department. So we will make sure that we avoid that conflict of interest.
Yeah, and if by some way it like sneaks in that you do get somebody from your department, please let us know as soon as possible, and we'll work that. We'll reassign that application. So that's an excellent point. Thank you, Marcella. So you don't need that discipline-specific knowledge to score the nominations. Ideally, if everything goes well, we'll be giving you around 15 nominations. This is considerably less actually than last year. We've recruited additional people on the committee. We have a few more focused applications this year, so there's not as many. So we hope not to overwhelm any individual reviewer with too many nominations. In general, what we've heard is it takes about 30 minutes to review these and get a good idea. We certainly don't say that as a requirement that you need to be done in 30 minutes. You need to take the time that it takes you to effectively understand the candidate and complete the rubric. We'll talk about that in a moment. But that gives you an idea about the sort of time commitment that's involved in this. So we encourage you to plan accordingly over the time that you have to review these. And so I just touched on that. We provide a rubric that helps to evaluate these processes or these applications, and to provide a process that can be as fair and consistent as possible, with the idea of making it easy for you to evaluate the particular criteria that we're using for our applicants. So let's talk a little bit about that rubric. So the idea here is the reason we provide this, rather than just provide, for example, again, people who have worked in the working with the graduate school process for university fellowships and the like. It's usually a single score that is used to begin to set up the what nominee should get that here. With not looking at graduate students here, but now looking at people who are going to be postdoctoral scholars, we have a lot more criteria that are important there. While we're still using numerical scores, we're providing this rubric so we can have areas of agreement where we are going to evaluate these particular candidates. That's the main goal there. And there's a large body of scholarly work done in this sort of evaluation science now, and it's become increasingly clear that providing a clear and robust rubric leads to a lot of beneficial effects when you're selecting a cohort of graduate students or any other type of trainee, including increased diversity, both of underrepresented minorities as well as different types of disciplines. And the idea here is to be able to provide as fair and clear a way of evaluating these, and consistent way of evaluating these candidates as possible. So the rubric that we provide will be evaluating both the nominee as well as the mentoring environment that nominee will be moving into. There's many categories that will be there, not many, but several categories that will be there, both for the nominee and the mentoring environment, and they're scored all on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. And the requirements listed for the score, and on the rubric you'll see there'll be a listing of what the expectations are for those particular scores. So whatever is a 5 will have examples underneath it. Whatever is a 1 in that category will have examples underneath it. And we actually, for those of you who reviewed last year, we had a lot of feedback on that sort of criteria. And we also ran this rubric through a couple of different types of evaluation, and we've revised those sort of guidance there. So hopefully that will help to see where you want to land. And we provide examples for the scores of 1, 3, and 5. And we provide the scores of 2 and 4 in between when you kind of fall in between those categories. We're trying to avoid fractional scores here, and we would like you to use as much of the range as possible. We do realize, of course, that it's a self-selecting population to some extent. You'll see some of these applicants are really very, very strong scholars, it's hard to be able to distinguish between them. We do want you to try to be critical. I mean, we have to have some separation of the scores here. But as long as you're consistent, you can, and you're using the criteria we're providing and the examples of those particular scores, we want you to score it appropriately within each category. We're also providing, based on feedback from both the applicants last year as well as some of the reviewers, we provide an area where you can provide key areas of improvement for future fellowship applications. A lot of these candidates, this is because we're looking at candidates who are early in their career before they've been in a postdoc for more than 2 years. They're looking for feedback, and if we're just providing a numerical score, it can be a challenge there. We would appreciate if when you are scoring below a 5, if you're provide a very brief comment. We're not talking about a lot of comments or very long, about what the key score driver is there, and with the idea of focusing on areas of improvement. These don't need to be verbose. They're just giving mostly the staff here at the OPA an idea of what your thought process was so that they can give feedback if the applicant wants feedback. Another important thing to remember is that while you're assigning a numerical score within these categories, these will be weighted somewhat differently based on the importance for the particular program. You'll see that there's categories in the rubric, and but we weight those slightly differently depending on what the category is. For example, the nominee score is weighted by 60%, whereas the environment is weighted by 40%, trying to reflect the fact that we want to have very strong nominees within this process. But the mentoring environment is still important. So the raw scores that we get in will go through a spreadsheet and then be transformed into the final score based by this weighting that takes place. So while the rubric will be much more specific, let me just give you an idea about the general criteria that we are looking for in the nominees. As I mentioned earlier, we're really looking for somebody who has an evidence of a high both accomplishment at this point, but also the ability for future scholarship, as reflected in their current scholarly record. We're certainly interested in trying to have areas that have interdisciplinary efforts. That's an area where, particularly as early career, hopefully soon to be early career faculty, having an interdisciplinary program would actually be an advantage as they move forward and try to develop their independent scholarly efforts. It's also helpful if they have some sort of track record at obtaining external or internal funding. Their CV will reflect that, whether they've had fellowships or other types of funding that supported their research in the past. We also look forward to well-articulated career goals. That's the whole criteria there, and how they expect to build towards having an independent research or scholarship career. We're also looking for evidence of leadership that they've taken within their discipline, that they have initiative where there's someone who can be a self-starter, and then they have potentially some mentoring or capacity for mentoring skills, perhaps by mentoring other trainees or high school students or some sort of outreach into the community. There's also a capacity to network effectively. There's a section where we're talking about the quality of the network available. Some of that can be judged by the extent of where the letter writers are coming from, how much they talk about different types of collaborations, things like that. I mentioned the diversity statement. We want to make sure that they have a solid understanding of the importance of diversity and equity, as well as the inclusion issues that are in their own discipline, as well as the general academic environment in the United States. We would like to see that they have a familiarity with the discipline-related programs and initiatives that are present at Ohio State. Try to understand whether they've actually done their research and whether that can indicate their overall interest in the program. Most of the reviewers from last year indicated how important the letters of recommendation are. Those are obviously a good way to understand the candidate and how they fit within their discipline and sort of on the career path that they're on. And we also have a category where we assign points that give some preference to external nominees and nominees who have less than 2 years of postdoctoral experience. I believe that's done administratively. Is that correct, Marcella?
Yes. We are going to score those 2 categories, so you won't have to.
Correct. So that won't be on the rubric, so you don't have to worry about that aspect of things. But I did want to mention that because that will alter the final score to some extent.
Yeah, I also want to mention that we did provide some instructions for the letter writers where we were asking them to focus on um, the nominees' potential for leadership in their discipline, and a lot of the other collaborative skills, communication skills, things of that nature. We wanted to avoid some of the restatements of the work that they did, the research that they did. Last year we had a lot of letters where basically they were saying the same thing as the nomination letter. And what these letters are for is for the reviewers to understand more about the person, not more about the research. Because like we said, this is very interdisciplinary and we don't expect you to understand everything about the research.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the nominees selection criteria. Some of the criteria that you'll be looking for when we talk about the mentoring environment, that's also important here, represents a significant portion of the score. We already talked a little bit about this point, but the importance of prior successful postdoctoral mentoring, and particularly, of course, with the caveats of fields where that there isn't a long history of postdoctoral scholars, but the idea of showing that there's been success in their trainees, whether those are postdoctoral trainees or if they have advanced graduate students who have gone on to faculty positions or other positions that are of importance in their field, that's an evidence of successful mentoring in that context. A lot of this has come, the mentoring philosophy, should be consistent with the research good mentoring practices. We'll list of these will be provided to you, so that'll be in the rubric as well. There's a section on the ethical standards of conducting research, so that's important to include there as well, particularly in the mentoring plan. There's evidence that the nominee will be providing a sufficient opportunity to provide the skills that are present there. And that's really needs to be driven again by discipline. The interaction between mentor and mentee is going to be different in different disciplines. What you may be familiar with an interaction with a postdoctoral scholar may be different than the sort of interactions that take place in other disciplines. So that's something that will be hopefully explained by the mentoring plan, where their interactions are taking place and the relevance of that interaction to them developing as scholars within their field. The idea here is just to get a confirmation that the nominee will be provided with the guidance and mentoring that they need to become independent scholars, and a clear understanding that that there'll be efforts made by both the mentor and the mentee to develop their mentoring network that's available to that nominee. That includes not just faculty here at OSU, but peers and staff on and off campus that help them to set up their individual network as they move forward and become independent scholars. And we also, as you'll see in the rubric, we expect that there'll be some support for professional development. We provide a lot of that from the OPA, but there's also going to be some that have local types of mentoring, particularly within their discipline. For example, if there were specific types of grant writing that needed to be emphasized in their particular discipline, that's something we don't do discipline specific at the OPA, so that might be something they could include in their professional development program, which might be a benefit as they move forward and become independent scholars. So a lot of this will come obviously out of the mentoring plan, but also out of the mentor's nomination letter. Any questions on that? Okay. So that's the information on the actual evaluation of those applications, and a lot of that's going to pivot off the rubric. And that rubric, and as well as the nominations, is what will be provided to you as a next step. As I mentioned earlier on the timeline, the OPA intends to send you on December 10th the following information, instructions, including some of the things we've gone over today, but just so you know the situation, also instructions on how to fill out the scores that you'll return to us. It'll have a link to the Buckeye box that will contain the nominations that you need to review. We'll also provide an Excel file. If anyone has a problem with accessing Excel files, please let us know. But the idea there is use that to record your scores, and then there's a score submission link within there as well. We've changed how we check those from last year. Last year we had a website which didn't work well for everybody, so we're going to try with an Excel file, and we think that will be something that at least you can do locally, so you should have some control over saving and things like that. We use a Word file to record those areas of key areas of improvement if you want to provide those for your particular sections. Those reviews that pivot off of that material are going to be due on January 18th. We'd like you to upload those to a Buckeye box using the link that's present in the score submission link there. And that's we're trying to keep to that deadline as much as possible because we want to be able to rank these as quickly as possible. Once we do that, based off the numerical scores, then we'll forward the reviewers a list of the top 15 to 20 candidates that are ranked based on those scores. We do that to be able to understand, have the nomination committee aware of who is coming off of, or who we're going to be asking whether they want to be part of the program. If there are objections to that, you'll send them to us, and we will, if you think that there's somebody there who shouldn't be in the top 25 or top 20, we take that into consideration there on whether we will actually extend a nomination or not. That's why we give you more candidates than we can actually accommodate in the program. We can only accommodate 10 per year. So we provide you extra ones if there's any issues raised by the reviewers during the step. And then finally, once we have that, we send an offer out to the remaining top 10 candidates, and if there's anyone turns that down, we'll move subsequently down the list until we use up all the spots we have available for our cohort next year. So that's the steps going forward there, the next steps there. When we actually have a cohort, the selection announcement will take place on January 28th. We hope to send out that first round of award notifications. That will not be public until we get the full group assigned. Once we have that, then we'll make a final announcement, public announcement of the winners for this year. And then in January of 2020, we'll have a reception for those for the winners for this next year. The reviewers will be invited to come to that as well, so we look forward to seeing you there at that in 2020. It's going to be a nice event. President Drake will be there, and he's would, I'm sure, like to thank you for your service as reviewers for the PPSP, as would I and the rest of the OPA. I'd like to say we greatly appreciate the effort put in here. I know how much it takes to review these sort of applications and how many of them there are, particularly this time of year, so we greatly appreciate you contributing to bringing great postdoctoral scholars to the Ohio State campus. So that's the extent of our presentation today. I'd be happy to take any other questions that you have that came up while we were going through. Appreciate the kind words there. If anybody else has any other questions while that's taking place, please feel free to type them in. I do want to emphasize that if you have a question about the program as times are going on here, our Marcella, and that's her email listed there, Hernandez.16, she's a good point of contact for technical concerns or other concerns there. If you have concerns, I'm more than happy to hear them as well. You're probably best off contacting both of us. But if that comes up, I will be sure to, if you contact me, I'm more than happy to talk about you with any aspect of the program too. And as we go forward, I'd like to hear if anybody else has suggestions about how we can change the program for next year. It's a very young program. We're still trying to get everything to work as smoothly as possible, so we're always interested in feedback too. And you'll have an opportunity, a formal opportunity to present that through a survey at the end of this process. So I have a couple of questions here. Okay, the first one is there a plan to scale the program in the future? More funding to support more spots? That's a great question. And yes, that's one of the things that we envision this program growing in the future. The President Drake and his office are very interested in how well this first couple of cohorts go and where they end up going in their academic positions. It's one of the reasons we want to have such a robust review process. We want to make sure we get very strong candidates, we can show a high degree of success in these first few years, so we can look to have an expansion of this program both at the university level by providing more funding and more spots, but also, and we have discussions about this today actually, looking at ways that we can partner with both campus entities as well as entities beyond campus, like different types of companies and nonprofit organizations, looking to have co-sponsored spots where one of these positions might be more focused in a particular area, but still also available as an opportunity for different types of disciplines on campus to provide applicants to that. So there's a couple of these sort of co-mentored or co-sponsored programs would give postdocs who aren't necessarily interested in an academic path an opportunity to also participate in the program as well. And we're looking at areas such as tech transfer, different types of academic disciplines, different types of entrepreneurship discipline or entrepreneurship opportunities that we could use to develop these sort of programs as well. So we're certainly hoping to get more of that as we go forward. So that was the first question there. I see some people are signing off, and you can feel free to do that if you need to go. I know we're approaching the end of the time here. Let me see here if there's any other questions. Scale the program. I see no other questions. So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to take those. Otherwise, I appreciate the feedback, and please feel free to reach out to me anytime you have any sort of questions or concerns or comments on the program. And as I said, you'll have a formal chance to do that too. At the end of the process, we'll provide a survey for you to tell us what's going on and your experiences. So if there's no other questions, I think we can move on, and I hope this was useful for all of you. I hope you understand the process a little bit better and look forward to those nomination packets arriving on the 10th. And if you have any questions after that, please let us know. I see there's one more person typing, so I'll hold this open for a little bit here. And did you have anything else you wanted to add, Marcella?
No, I think we covered everything.
Great.
But again, if questions arise in the future, please don't hesitate to contact us.
Right. You got our emails there. That's the best way to reach us. And again, thank you. I mean, I really do, and the whole office appreciates your contribution to this. It's a great program. I think it's a great opportunity for us to begin to increase and even get better scholars coming on campus. It's a great opportunity provided by the President's Office, and I hope we can continue to take advantage of that. And your review work and coming up with the best scholars is an important part of that.
Yep.
So with that in mind, have a great day. I hope you all found this useful. And as Marcella said, there'll be a recorded version of this available if you want to review this information at any point during the review process. So have a great day. Hope you have a good holiday season, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon.
Thank you for your participation in this webinar and for reviewing.